Hello and welcome to another episode of Cascadia Mountain Weather. It's Thursday, January 23rd, 2025, and we've seen an incredible amount of sunny, dry weather this January. So this is a photo that Wyatt took in the Olympics last weekend. So maybe he can get us started by talking about the recent weather.
Yeah, I think that the weather's been interesting to me. It's really been allowing people to get to places that you might not normally think about going in kind of the middle of the winter. This is going on week two, almost week three of dry spell. We had like a little interruption a couple weeks ago, but generally it's been pretty dry. And we have had kind of slightly shifting patterns, but the main idea why we've been staying so dry is we have this big ridge of high pressure. It's either been over us or it's been a little bit to our west. And so that really diverts kind of any storms way up into Alaska, maybe even beyond. Even Alaska is not really getting the storms at the moment. And then that's been allowing some of that crazy cold weather to move down into kind of the middle section and the southern section of the country. So New Orleans saw 8 inches of snow this week. Florida just set its all-time one-day record at 10 inches, I believe, somewhere near Pensacola. Um, so like crazy snowstorms, at least in that section of the country that haven't been seen for 100 years, or more, or ever in recorded history. So really interesting to see. Meanwhile, here, this is kind of the climate data showing accumulated precipitation for January, and this is at Diablo Dam. So in the North Cascades, kind of low elevation, but does a good sense of like showing what happens for precipitation in that North Cascades area. And this goes back, history goes back before 1920 with some missing years in between, but this is the driest year that has been recorded at Diablo. There is one year that's missing in kind of this 1985 time frame that might have been drier, but Diablo in that North Cascades has only seen about an inch of precipitation so far this month. Average is much closer to 10 to maybe even a little bit higher. And so it is pretty crazy how dry it's been. And it's really going to be only at the end of the month that we'll see that precipitation return. When I brought this up just to kind of we'll skip through to go back to the current status. So what we're seeing this weekend is we're kind of seeing a storm move in from the east and bringing a little bit colder air. It's actually going to end up going down towards California, and you're going to bring a little bit of precipitation down there, which will be good for the wildfires that have been ongoing down there. But this is the 5,000 foot temperature, and this is in Celsius. And so this dark blue line kind of represents where it drops below freezing. And we can see that as we move through Friday, so tomorrow and into the weekend, we get much colder temperatures, not like crazy cold by any means, but cold enough that will mostly be below freezing, kind of almost at every elevation. As we move later through Saturday, so this is 4 p.m. on Saturday. And as we get into Sunday, you can see these temperatures starting to warm as an inversion gets into effect. And that will continue as we go into Monday and Tuesday, where the temperature here is upwards of 8 degrees Celsius, so getting close to 50 degrees Fahrenheit at five at 5,000 feet. And so Kyle will get into more a little bit later about what that might mean for conditions on the snow. You can see this inversion setting up. I'm looking at the snow level. So, I mean, not there was like a slight kind of push of precipitation that moved through earlier today in some areas. We'll take a glance at that in a second. Snow level right now, that freezing level is like around 3,000 feet, but that doesn't really tell the whole story because we have an inversion. So down in the valleys, you're below freezing. At the 3,000 foot level, you're kind of below freezing as well. And at the upper elevations, you're below freezing. So it'll only be later as we get into kind of Sunday and later next week where the inversion really takes effect and we see warmer temperatures up above.
So now we're going to take a peek at how the snowpack is doing compared to average through this dry spell. So this is January 1st, and at January 1st, we were coming out of a very wet, stormy period around the holidays. And so we had generally around average to a little above average snowpack, especially in areas above 4,000 feet. But we've had a very dry January. And so now we definitely regressed some, but maybe not as much as you might expect. You can see that a lot of areas in the Southern Cascades are still right around 100% of normal. And the Olympics are so close to 100%. It's more kind of the Central and North Cascades that have dipped down to 60, 70% level. But that's definitely nothing we can't recover from. So I think it really shows that despite the fact it's been dry, it's just the sun is not very strong and the temperatures are still pretty cold. So we really haven't lost any snow at all above 3,000 feet. There's been basically no melting going on. So here's the forecast for Squamish Pass. Very sunny every day. Probably less fog than maybe we've seen during periods of inversion. Um, and then the temperature warming up definitely throughout the weekend. So Saturday is pretty chilly, definitely cold nights every night. But then Sunday and Monday, probably going into inversion pattern. That also means that the upper elevations, it might stay warmer throughout the night too, whereas down in the valleys, it might cool off a little bit. And we might start to see some precipitation return next Thursday or so. So the avalanche danger is green across the board, and it's been that way for a week plus now, which has created, opportunities for people to get out and get to places that maybe are often difficult to get to. You can see that from the NWAC observations. There really haven't been many natural avalanches observed recently, and there's also been a lot of observations from more remote parts of like the North Cascades and the Olympics and such like that. So where while the backcountry ski conditions definitely are challenging in a lot of places, and good snow, definitely requires a bit of creativity. People are still getting out, whether it's on skis or snowshoes, or just hiking and enjoying the nice weather. So there is a pattern change on the horizon in that 1 to 2 week time frame. We don't want to get too excited because it's still a week away, but the models have seemed pretty consistent in suggesting that around the beginning of February we'll start to shift into a colder and wetter pattern, which will be great because it'll bring back snowfall. And the long-term February outlook issued by the Climate Prediction Center is colder and wetter than normal for the Pacific Northwest. So let's cross our fingers and hope that that comes true. So thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully we see a change of weather in the next week, and we hope you enjoy the sunny weather in the meantime.